The morning mist clung to the ancient mountains like a shroud, hiding secrets that had slumbered for 3,000 years. In the valley below, the orphanage of St. Meridian stood as it had for centuries, its stone walls weathered but strong. The building housed 43 children, but none drew attention quite like Kira. She was small for her 12 years, with dark hair that never seemed to stay properly braided, and eyes the color of storm clouds. The other children avoided her, not out of cruelty, but because strange things happened when Kira spoke. Her words carried weight in ways that made adults uncomfortable and children nervous. Sister Helena, the orphanage's eldest caretaker, watched Kira from the kitchen window as the girl sat alone in the courtyard. The child was speaking to the mountain again, her voice too quiet to hear but her posture intent, as if someone was listening back. "Still talking to herself," muttered Brother Marcus, joining Helena at the window. His thick arms were covered in flour from the morning's bread-making. "The adoption interviews next week won't go well if she keeps that up." Helena frowned. "She's not talking to herself." "Then who?" The old woman's weathered hands gripped the windowsill. "I don't know. But I've been here 40 years, Marcus. I've seen children come and go, but never one who—" She paused, searching for words. "Never one who makes the mountains feel like they're listening." High above in the peaks, something ancient stirred at the sound of a human voice speaking truth for the first time in millennia. The Kethmaran had ruled the galactic sector for over 5,000 years, through a simple but effective strategy. Keep the dangerous species sleeping. They were master manipulators, beings of pure energy, who could project thoughts and dreams across vast distances. Their greatest achievement was putting the dragons of Terralis into the Great Sleep. Commander Zeexthal floated in his energy form above the planet's surface, reviewing the daily reports from the planetary monitoring station. The numbers satisfied him. The neural dampening field remained at optimal strength, broadcasting soothing lies directly into the dragons' sleeping minds. The field told them that all was peaceful, that their protective watch was no longer needed, that they could rest safely for eternity. "Sir," his aide's voice crackled through the communication system, "we're detecting minor fluctuations in the dampening field around Sector 7. Zixthal's energy form pulsed with mild annoyance. "Probably just solar interference. Run a diagnostic and boost the signal strength by 15%. "Already done, sir." The fluctuations continue. The commander's form shifted to a more alert configuration. In 3,000 years of maintaining the Great Sleep, they had never encountered sustained fluctuations. "What's causing it?" "Unknown, sir. The anomaly seems to be originating from the surface." The human settlement in the valley. Zixthal contemplated this information. Humans were considered a minor species, barely worth monitoring. They had no telepathic abilities, no energy manipulation, no advanced technology. They were simply loud and emotional in ways that other species found crude. "Increase monitoring of the human settlement," he ordered. "If they're somehow interfering with the dampening field, we may need to adjust their population." The aide's energy signature flickered with uncertainty. "Sir, our analysis indicates the interference is not technological. It appears to be biological." "Explain." "Someone is speaking, sir, and their words are penetrating the field." Commander Zixthal's form went rigid. In all their recorded history, only one species had ever possessed the ability to cut through Kethmaran mental manipulation with pure vocal expression. But that species had been extinct for millions of years. "Monitor everything," he commanded. "I want to know every word spoken in that valley." Back at the orphanage, Kira finished her morning conversation with the mountain and walked back toward the main building. The other children were gathered around Brother Marcus, who was distributing assignments for the day's chores. Kira always got the difficult jobs: cleaning the high windows, organizing the storage cellars, or maintaining the small garden that somehow always grew better when she worked in it. "Kira," Sister Helena called out as the girl passed. "Come with me." They walked together to the chapel, a small stone room with windows that looked directly up at the mountain peaks. Helena had always found comfort here, but today something felt different. The air seemed more alive, charged with an energy she couldn't identify. "Child," Helena began carefully, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." Kira nodded, settling onto one of the wooden benches. Her storm-gray eyes were serious, older than her years. When you sit in the courtyard each morning, what exactly are you doing? Talking. To whom? Kira was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the mountain peaks visible through the windows. To the sleepers. They've been dreaming lies for so long, Sister Helena. Someone has to tell them the truth. The old woman felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of lies? The ones that keep them sleeping when they should be awake. The voices in the sky tell them everything is safe, that there's no need to watch over things anymore. But that's not true. There are people here who need protecting. Helena's breath caught. People like us? Like everyone. The sky voices don't care about any of us. They just want the dragons to stay asleep so they can do whatever they want. The chapel fell silent, except for the wind whistling through the mountains. Helena stared at this small girl who spoke of dragons and sky voices as if they were simple facts. Any other child would sound delusional. But when Kira spoke, the words carried the weight of absolute truth. How do you know this? Helena whispered. Kira turned to meet her eyes. Because when I speak true words, the sleepers hear me. And they're starting to dream different dreams. 3 peaks away, in a cavern that had been sealed for 3 millennia, an eyelid the size of a cathedral door twitched. Deep in the dragon's mind, the soothing voices that had sung of eternal peace for so long were being challenged by something new. A small voice, pure and clear, speaking words that rang with honesty. The dragon's massive consciousness, dulled by centuries of artificial sleep, began to fight against the fog of deception. For the first time in 3,000 years, one of the great protectors of Terrales began to question the dreams it had been fed. In the monitoring station orbiting the planet, alarms began to sound. Zixthal materialized in the command center, his energy form crackling with agitation. Report. Dragon 7 Alpha is showing increased brain activity, the technician reported, his voice tight with concern. Neural pathways that have been dormant for millennia are beginning to activate. Increase the dampening field around that sector immediately. Sir, we're already at maximum output. The field isn't losing strength. It's being countered. The commander's form pulsed dangerously. By what? The human child, sir. Every time she speaks, Dragon 7 Alpha's resistance to the field increases. It's as if her voice is teaching the dragon to recognize our influence. Zixthal considered his options. The Kethmaran had maintained galactic dominance for thousands of years, through careful manipulation and the strategic neutralization of threats. The dragons of Terrales represented one of the few species capable of challenging their rule. Beings of immense power, fierce intelligence, and an unfortunate tendency to protect other species from exploitation. How many humans are in that settlement? He asked. 67 total. 43 children, 24 adults. Prepare a containment field. If we cannot silence the child through the dampening array, we will silence her permanently. The aide's energy signature flickered nervously. Sir, direct intervention on a protected world requires authorization from the High Council. Then get it. As the Kethmaran commanders began planning their response, Kira sat in the orphanage garden, pulling weeds from around the vegetable plants. The work was peaceful, and it gave her time to think about the dreams she had been receiving. The sleeper. She had begun thinking of it as her sleeper, since it seemed to listen most closely to her voice, had been sharing fragments of its memories, images of vast cities where dragons and other species lived together in harmony, glimpses of a time when the sky was clear of the energy beings who now whispered lies. She could sense the sleeper's growing restlessness, its desire to wake and see the world with clear eyes. But she also felt its confusion. The artificial dreams had been so consistent, so carefully crafted, that the dragons struggled to distinguish between truth and deception. I have to help you remember, she whispered to the mountain. I have to help you see what's real. In response, she felt a presence touch her mind, vast, ancient, and slowly awakening. The contact lasted only a moment, but in that brief connection, Kira saw through eyes that had witnessed the birth of stars. She felt the weight of responsibility that had driven the dragons to accept their role as protectors, and she understood, with perfect clarity, Why the Sky Voices had worked so hard to keep them sleeping. The dragons weren't just powerful beings resting in the mountains. They were the guardians of every sentient species in this sector of the galaxy. And for 3,000 years, those species had been defenseless. That evening, as the children of the orphanage settled into their beds, Kira lay awake listening to the wind. But tonight, the wind carried something new. A sound like distant thunder. Rhythmic and deep, it was the sound of a massive heart beginning to beat faster. The dragon was starting to wake up. In orbit above Terralis, the Keth-Moran fleet moved into position. Commander Zixthal had received his authorization. By dawn, the human settlement would be contained, and the voice that threatened their carefully maintained deception would be silenced forever. But in the depths of the mountain, ancient eyes that had been closed for 3,000 years began to open, and in the orphanage below, a 12-year-old girl who spoke only truth prepared to change the course of galactic history. The age of deception was coming to an end. The first sign that something had changed came at dawn when the birds stopped singing. Sister Helena woke to an unnatural silence that made her skin crawl. In 40 years at the orphanage, she had never experienced such complete quiet. Even the wind had stilled, as if the entire mountain was holding its breath. She found Kira already awake in the courtyard, sitting perfectly still with her face turned toward the peaks. The girl's eyes were closed, but tears streamed down her cheeks. "Child, what's wrong?" Helena asked, rushing to kneel beside her. Kira opened her eyes, and Helena gasped. The storm-gray irises now flickered with tiny points of golden light, like distant stars. "They're in so much pain," Kira whispered. 3,000 years of lies, Sister Helena. 3,000 years of being told that everything was safe, while people suffered and died without protection. They trusted the Sky Voices, and the Sky Voices betrayed them. A deep rumble echoed through the valley, so low it was felt rather than heard. Dust drifted from the orphanage's stone walls, and several children ran outside in alarm. "What was that?" Brother Marcus called out, emerging from the kitchen with flour still coating his hands. Kira stood slowly, her gaze never leaving the mountain peaks. "He's waking up, but the Sky Voices are fighting back. They're trying to force him to sleep again." High above the valley, Commander Zixthal materialized his energy form around the lead attack vessel. The fleet had dropped out of orbit during the night, positioning themselves for a surgical strike on the human settlement. But their target was proving more problematic than anticipated. "Status report," he commanded. "The dampening field is failing." "Sir," the technician reported, his voice strained. "Dragon 7 Alpha has achieved 40% consciousness and is actively resisting our neural influence. The other dragons in the range are beginning to show sympathetic activation." Zixthal's form pulsed with dangerous colors. "How many others?" 17 confirmed, sir. "Possibly more." The human child's voice seems to be spreading somehow, creating a resonance effect that amplifies across the dragon network. "Impossible. Humans have no telepathic capabilities." "No, sir. But they appear to have something else. When this one speaks, it carries what our analysts are calling absolute authenticity markers. The dragon's minds are programmed to recognize and respond to completely truthful communication. They cannot ignore it." The commander studied the readings flowing across his display. In all their galactic conquests, the Keth-Moran had encountered dozens of species with various forms of mental resistance. But this was different. This wasn't resistance, it was immunity. The human child wasn't blocking their influence. She was simply speaking truth so clearly that lies became impossible to maintain in her presence. "Prepare the containment field," he ordered. "We end this now." In the orphanage garden, Kira suddenly stiffened. Her eyes, still flickering with those strange golden lights, went wide with alarm. "They're coming," she said to Sister Helena. "The Sky Voices are sending ships. They want to stop me from talking to the sleepers." Helena felt her heart racing. "Ships? What kind of ships?" Before Kira could answer, the air above the valley began to shimmer. Slowly, like a mirage becoming solid, 3 enormous vessels materialized in the sky. They were built from some kind of crystalline material that bent light around their edges, making them difficult to look at directly. The children of the orphanage pointed and shouted, some running for cover while others stared in wonder. But Helena only had eyes for Kira, who had begun to shake. They're so angry, the girl whispered. They've spent thousands of years building their empire on the lie that the dragons chose to sleep. But the dragons never chose anything. They were tricked into it. A beam of sickly green light descended from the lead ship, forming a dome-shaped barrier around the entire orphanage. Helena tried to run toward the gate, but her hand passed right through the green energy. She could see out, but when she tried to call for help, no sound emerged. A silence field, Kira said quietly. They want to trap me so I can't speak to the sleepers anymore. But even as she said it, her voice continued to carry. Not through the air, which was now blocked by alien technology, but through the stone beneath their feet, through the roots of the ancient mountains, through pathways that predated the Kethmaran Empire by millions of years. Deep in his cavern, Dragon 7 Alpha felt the child's distress and responded with a roar that shook the foundations of the world. Commander Zeekthal materialized on the bridge of his flagship, studying the readings from their containment field. Report. Containment is holding, sir. No sound can escape the barrier. Then why are the dragons still awakening? The technician's energy form flickered nervously. Unknown, sir. The child appears to have found an alternative communication method. Our sensors can't identify the medium she's using. Zixthal considered this development. The Kethmaran understood energy manipulation, telepathy, and technological communication, but there were older forms of connection, primitive links that predated advanced civilization. Could the humans have retained some ancestral ability that other species had evolved beyond? Sir, another technician interrupted. We're detecting seismic activity throughout the mountain range. The dragons are not just awakening. They're preparing to emerge. Through the orphanage windows, Helena watched in amazement as cracks began appearing in the mountainsides. Not violent ruptures, but careful openings, as if the stone itself was willingly parting to allow passage. Golden light began to seep from these cracks, warm and welcoming, unlike the sickly green of the alien ships overhead. And with that light came a sound that made every human in the valley stop and listen. A deep, musical humming that spoke of ancient wisdom and protective love. They're singing, Kira said, her tears now reflecting the golden glow. They're singing the truth songs, the ones that cut through all deception. The sky voices can't stop this. In orbit around Terrales, High Commander Veltar received the emergency transmission from the surface fleet with growing alarm. As the supreme leader of the Kethmaran forces in this sector, he had overseen the Great Sleep for the past millennium. The thought of the dragons awakening filled him with a terror that his energy-based species rarely experienced. How many are active? He asked Zeekthal. 37 confirmed awakening, sir. The effect is accelerating. Each dragon that wakes seems to strengthen the signal, making it easier for others to break free from the dampening field. And the source? This human child? Contained but not silenced, she has found a way to communicate that we cannot block. Veltar contemplated the options. The dragons of Terrales had been the single greatest threat to Kethmaran expansion 3,000 years ago, not because of their physical power, though that was considerable, but because of their absolute commitment to protecting other species from exploitation. With the dragons active, the Kethmaran could not maintain their empire of hidden manipulation. Prepare for planetary sterilization, he commanded. Sir, if we cannot silence one human child, we will silence the entire world. The dragons cannot awaken if there is nothing left to protect. The orbital bombardment platforms began charging their weapons, preparing to reduce Terrales to lifeless rock. But even as they powered up, the golden light from the mountains grew brighter, and the dragon song grew stronger. In the orphanage courtyard, Kira felt the shift in the alien intentions like a physical blow. The sky voices had abandoned all pretense now. They were no longer trying to maintain their deception. They were preparing to destroy everything rather than let the truth be known. She stood and walked to the center of the courtyard, placing her hands flat against the ancient stones. Through this connection, she could feel every dragon on the planet, their massive hearts beating in rhythm as they fought to break free from 3 millennia of enforced sleep. I know you can hear me, she said, her voice somehow carrying to every cave, every mountain peak, every ancient resting place where the Guardians had been deceived into slumber. They want to destroy everything you've sworn to protect. They want to kill everyone on this world, rather than let you wake up and see what they've been doing while you slept. The response was immediate and overwhelming. 50 dragons roared as one, their voices combining into a sound that shattered the Kethmaran containment field, like glass. The green barrier around the orphanage dissolved, and Sister Helena gasped as natural sound returned to the valley. But more than sound returned. With the breaking of the containment field, something else was released. The full truth of 3,000 years of Kethmaran deception, transmitted through the Dragon Network to every world in the sector where the Kethmaran had established protection over sleeping guardian species. Across 17 star systems, ancient protectors began to wake. Commander Zixthal watched his instruments with growing horror. "Sir, we're receiving reports from across the sector. Guardian species on every world are awakening simultaneously. The resonance effect has gone galactic." Above the orphanage, cracks of golden light began appearing in the crystalline hulls of the Kethmaran ships. The dragon song was not just awakening the Guardians, it was disrupting the energy matrices that held the alien vessels together. "Fall back," Zixthal commanded. "All ships, emergency retreat." But it was too late. The first ship dissolved into sparkling fragments as its energy matrix collapsed completely. The remaining vessels fled toward orbit, trailing streams of dissipating energy as the truth song continued to tear apart their technological deceptions. In the mountains around the valley, massive shapes began to emerge from the stone. Not breaking out violently, but flowing through the rock as if it were water, their golden scales gleaming in the morning light. Sister Helena had read about dragons in the ancient texts, but nothing had prepared her for the reality. They were beautiful beyond description, each one unique, but sharing an aura of profound wisdom and gentle strength. Their eyes, large as windows, reflected not hunger or greed but an infinite compassion for all living things. The largest dragon, the one Kira had been speaking to all these mornings, approached the orphanage with careful steps that somehow made no sound. When he lowered his massive head to look directly at the small girl, his voice resonated through the minds of everyone present. "Little truth speaker," the dragon said, his mental voice warm with gratitude. "You have awakened us from a very long and troubled sleep. We are in your debt." Kira reached out and placed her small hand against the dragon's snout, feeling the warmth of scales that had not felt sunlight for 3,000 years. "You don't owe me anything," she said simply. "I just told you what was true." The dragon's eyes crinkled in what might have been a smile. "Yes, and truth, little one, is the most powerful force in the universe, more powerful than any weapon, more lasting than any empire built on lies." Around the valley, more dragons continued to emerge, their songs creating a harmonious symphony that reached across the stars. The age of Kethmaran deception was ending, and across the galaxy, the age of protection had begun again. But the Kethmaran would not surrender their empire without a fight. High above the planet, the orbital bombardment platforms finished charging their weapons. If they could not maintain their deception, they would eliminate the evidence. The final battle between truth and lies was about to begin. The orbital bombardment platforms unleashed their fury just as the sun reached its highest point in the sky above Terralis. Beams of concentrated energy, each one capable of melting mountain ranges, descended toward the planet's surface like falling stars of destruction. They never reached their targets. The dragons of Terralis rose as one, their massive forms creating a living shield above the world they had sworn to protect. The ancient magic that flowed through their scales, dormant for 3 millennia, blazed to life in response to the threat. Energy beams that should have carved continents apart instead scattered like harmless light against the protective barrier of dragon song and dragon will. Kira stood in the orphanage courtyard, her hand still resting against the great dragon's snout, and watched the battle unfold above. But her attention was not on the spectacle of alien weapons failing against dragon magic. Instead, she was focused on something far more important, the voices reaching out to her from across the galaxy. "Can you hear them?" she asked the dragon, whose name she now knew was Valthus the Golden, first guardian of the Western Peaks. Yes, little truth speaker. Our brothers and sisters on distant worlds, awakening as we have awakened. The song you began here echoes across the stars. Through her connection with Valthus, Kira could sense the scope of what was happening. On Arxion Prime, crystal dragons were emerging from their enforced sleep beneath the glass cities. On the ocean world of Nerith, sea dragons were rising from abyssal depths where they had dreamed away the centuries. Everywhere the Kethmaran had established dominance through the manipulation of guardian species, those guardians were now breaking free. But more importantly, they were all learning the truth. High Commander Veltar materialized on the bridge of his command vessel, watching in disbelief as his most powerful weapons proved useless against the dragon defense. Around him, his officers flickered with the energy-based equivalent of panic. Sir, bombardment is ineffective. The dragons have established a planetary shield we cannot penetrate. Then we retreat and call for reinforcements from the core worlds, Veltar commanded. Sir, I'm receiving emergency transmissions from across the sector. Dragon awakenings are being reported on 17 worlds simultaneously. Our forces are retreating everywhere. Veltar's energy form pulsed with disbelief. Impossible. Those worlds have been pacified for millennia. Sir, the problem appears to be spreading through some kind of quantum resonance effect. Each awakening strengthens the others, and in every case, the catalyst seems to be the same. Absolute truth communication that cannot be blocked or countered. End quote. For the first time in his existence, High Commander Veltar experienced something the Kethmaran had thought themselves immune to. Fear. Not fear of physical destruction, which was meaningless to energy beings, but fear of irrelevance. The Kethmaran Empire was built on the foundation that no species could resist their mental manipulation. If that foundation crumbled, prepare for full retreat, he ordered. All forces, withdraw to the core worlds, immediately. But even as he gave the command, Veltar knew it was already too late. The awakening had spread beyond their ability to contain it. Back on Terralis, Sister Helena watched in amazement as dragons continued to emerge from mountains throughout the visible range. Each one was magnificent in their own way. Some gleaming, like polished silver, others displaying scales that shifted through every color of the rainbow. Still others appearing to be carved from living gemstone. But what struck her most was not their beauty or power. It was their gentleness. These beings, each one capable of leveling cities, approached the orphanage with the careful tenderness of parents checking on sleeping children. Sister Helena, Kira called out, gesturing for the old woman to approach. Valthus wants to speak with you. Helena walked forward on trembling legs, unsure of the proper protocol for addressing an ancient dragon, but Valthus solved her dilemma by lowering his great head in a gesture of respect. Good woman, the dragon's voice resonated in her mind. For many years you have cared for the young ones in our absence. We are grateful. Ablon. We didn't know you were there, Helena managed to say. We were there, sleeping and dreaming lies, while you and others like you did the work we should have been doing, protecting the innocent, caring for the helpless, speaking truth when others chose silence. The dragon's massive eyes reflected profound sadness. We have much to make up for. Around the valley, other dragons were having similar conversations with the orphanage children. Brother Marcus found himself deep in discussion with a dragon whose scales looked like burnished copper about the best methods for growing food in difficult soil. Several of the children were comparing notes with dragons about their favorite games and stories. It was, Helena realized, the most natural thing in the world. The dragons had always been meant to be part of their community, not distant guardians watching from afar, but active participants in the daily work of making life better for everyone. What happens now? She asked Valthus. Now we rebuild, the dragon replied. 3,000 years of deception have left scars across the galaxy. Species that should have been protected were exploited. Worlds that should have flourished were stripped bare. Civilizations that should have grown in wisdom were kept ignorant and afraid. But the Kethmaran are fleeing, Kira pointed out. Won't they just find somewhere else to hide and plan their return? Valthus turned one great eye toward the small girl who had changed everything. Little truth speaker, do you truly think the galaxy will allow them to hide, now that you have shown us how to hear honesty above all else? As if in answer to his words, new voices began reaching them through the Dragon Network. Reports from across the inhabited galaxy as world after world experienced the same awakening. The Kethmaran had based their empire on a simple principle: convince the Guardians to sleep, then exploit everyone else. But with all the Guardians now awake and connected, that empire was dissolving like morning mist. On distant Arxian Prime, crystal dragons were exposing the Kethmaran mining operations that had been strip mining the planet's core. On Nerith, sea dragons were revealing the underwater cities where enslaved populations had been forced to work in secret. Everywhere the energy beings had established hidden control, dragon voices now carried the truth to all who could hear it. They're running to the core worlds, Kira observed, her strange connection allowing her to sense the retreating Kethmaran fleets. But they can't run from the truth forever. No, agreed Valthus. And more importantly, they can no longer spread their deceptions. Every world in this galaxy now knows what honest communication sounds like. Thanks to you. Kira looked up at the magnificent being who had become her friend. I still don't understand why I could do it when no one else could. Because, little one, you never learned that speaking truth was anything special. Most adults learn to compromise their honesty for comfort or safety. Most species develop sophisticated ways to deceive themselves and others. But you, the dragon's voice carried infinite warmth. You simply said what was real, without fear of consequences or concern for how others might react. Sister Helena realized the profound truth in those words. Kira had awakened the dragons not through any special power or ancient magic, but through the simple human ability to speak honestly about what she saw. In a galaxy full of beings who had learned to manipulate truth for advantage, the straightforward honesty of one orphan child had been revolutionary. What about the orphanage? Brother Marcus asked, approaching the group with his usual practical concerns. With all these changes happening, how do we care for the children? The copper-scaled dragon he had been speaking with answered, You will not be caring for them alone anymore. Good brother. We have learned much during our long sleep about the value of community. If you will have us, we would like to be part of this family you have built. Over the following days, as the Kethmaran fleet retreated to increasingly distant star systems, the dragons of Terralise began the work of integration. They helped expand the orphanage buildings. Their precise control of stone and metal, making construction swift and beautiful. They shared their vast knowledge of medicine, agriculture, and engineering with the human caretakers. Most importantly, they provided the security that allowed the children to grow up without fear. Kira found herself at the center of a transformation that extended far beyond their small valley. Representatives from dozens of worlds came to meet the girl who had spoken truth so clearly that it shattered galactic deception. Scientists wanted to study her. Politicians wanted to recruit her. Religious leaders wanted to proclaim her a prophet. But Kira remained what she had always been, a 12-year-old orphan who said what she saw and helped take care of her family. They want me to come speak on their worlds, she told Valthus one evening as they sat together watching the sunset. They think if I go there, I can solve their problems too. And what do you think, little truth speaker? Kira was quiet for a moment, considering. I think every world already has people who can speak honestly if they choose to. They just need to remember that truth is more important than safety. Wise words. But will you go? Maybe, when I'm older. For now, I want to stay here and help raise my brothers and sisters. And, she smiled up at her enormous friend, I want to learn more about taking care of dragons. Someone has to make sure you don't fall asleep again. Vaelthus rumbled with laughter, a sound like distant thunder but warm and comforting. I do not think that will be a problem, little one. We have learned the value of staying awake. Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council was forming, not as a governing body, but as a communication network, connecting all worlds where guardians and protected species worked together. The Kethmaran Empire had been replaced by something unprecedented, a voluntary alliance based on truth and mutual protection. The energy beings themselves were not destroyed or exiled. Many chose to join the new order, abandoning their manipulative ways to become honest participants in galactic civilization. Others retreated to distant galaxies, perhaps to build new empires of deception. But they would find the task much harder now, as knowledge of how to recognize and resist mental manipulation spread throughout known space. At the heart of this transformation remained a simple truth. Honesty, spoken without fear or agenda, was more powerful than any weapon. One human child, speaking to sleeping dragons in a mountain valley, had proved that the greatest strength in the universe was not the ability to force others to believe lies, but the courage to tell the truth, regardless of the consequences. Years later, when historians wrote about the end of the age of deception, they would struggle to explain how such a massive change had begun with something so small. How could the words of one orphaned girl have toppled an empire that had endured for millennia? The answer was simpler than they wanted to believe. The galaxy had been full of people waiting for permission to speak honestly, to act with integrity, to protect those who needed protection. All they needed was one clear voice to show them it was possible. Kira provided that voice, not through magic or technology or divine intervention, but through the most human of qualities, the stubborn insistence that truth mattered more than comfort. And in the end, that was enough to wake the dragons and change the stars. The orphanage of St. Meridian became a place of pilgrimage. Not because of any miracle performed there, but because it proved that ordinary people doing ordinary good could change everything. Children still played in the courtyard where Kira had first spoken to the mountains. Dragons still emerged from the peaks to share in the daily life of the valley. And sometimes, on quiet mornings when the mist clung to the ancient stones, visitors claimed they could still hear it. The echo of a child's voice speaking truth so clearly that it had awakened the guardians of the galaxy and taught the universe to listen.